Good evening. Pat's professional career as a senior and respected social worker enabled her to serve with distinction and speak with authority on social care issues. I understand that a memorial service is being planned for Pat's family to take place at some point in October, and I hope to be able to represent the Council at that event. Are there any members that wish to speak? Alan Gray.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to pay tribute to Pat Hill, a friend and previous fellow councillor for the now defunct Kingsway ward. Pat was a dear friend and an excellent councillor, and I feel privileged to have shared a ward with her in this city. Those of you who knew her will know that she was fastidious and fanatical in every subject she grabbed hold of. Her particular passion, though, was social services, and she contributed greatly in this area. Even after her time as a councillor, and right up to her tragic death, she was still contributing her time to social services, in particular the fostering panel. Pat wasn't one to search the limelight, but was relentless in supporting and defending those less fortunate in our society. Pat was a real lady of our chamber, and she is a genuine loss to the city. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On behalf of the Liberal Democrat group, and particularly for myself, I was very sad to hear of Pat's passing. I had the privilege of working with Pat as a newly elected councillor back in 2000-2001, and we had quite a lot of fun when we went away on local government social services conferences, and I have fond memories of having a couple of pints with her in the bar one evening. But she was a very great lady. She showed me the ropes. We worked very well on the Social Services Committee together. She as chair and me for a short while under her as vice chair. So I owe her a great debt of gratitude in getting me started. And I'm sure, along with my colleagues here, we will certainly miss her, though we haven't seen so much of her latterly. And I wish to send condolences to her family.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I too can speak for the Labour Party and my Labour councillors here this evening in that Pat was a very dedicated supporter and active member, and indeed, as you said yourself, she did serve on the council for 6 years when she was a member of the Kingsway ward. She had, as you quite rightly said, her professional background, which actually stood her in great stead when she was dealing with issues such as social care and children and young people. I sat with her, indeed, for several months of this year when I was the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, when I attended the fostering panel, and she was chair of that, until fairly recently, in fact. And she was very, very dedicated, very committed. And if there was any speculation of any injustice to any child in this city, you can rest assured that Pat actually got to the bottom of the issue and actually did what was best for the children and young people that we serve here in Derby, and I think she ought to be praised for that. She was fastidious, as Councillor Graves has already said. She was an excellent councillor in her ward, very active, and again she served the Kingsway ward people very well. Her list of committees and responsibilities is endless, Mr Mayor, and I won't endeavour to read everything that's before me, but she took part in most committees. She was vice chair of the anti-poverty subcommittee. She was chair of the Best Value Social Care Committee, and that gives you an idea of the flavour of her involvement. And I know one of the committees she especially enjoyed being involved with was the Women's Committee, the Women's Advisory Committee, and she actually attended the Derby Women's Centre Management Committee, and she used to fight for issues to improve facilities for women throughout this city. I know her sons, both Kim and Tom, obviously were most upset to hear the news of her illness, and it was a pretty sudden illness, and obviously her passing came too quickly in our view. She will be remembered within the council. She will be remembered in the Labour Party for all the work and commitment she's given to Derby. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hickson.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Although Pat and I were at opposite ends of the political spectrum, and we had many interesting debates and discussions and arguments. I admired Pat for her articulate, intelligent and able way in which she discharged her council duties. She took no prisoners, I think, in terms of the issues that she thought strongly about and which she wished to pursue on behalf of members of the public in this city, and I think we owe a great debt to her. She made an enormous contribution to this council in the time that she was here, and especially in the area of social services. And we miss members with the professional knowledge and integrity and ability of people like Pat Hill. We owe a great debt to the work that she put in on behalf of members of the public in this city. I certainly both respected and admired her, and on behalf of the Conservative group would wish to pay tribute to the contribution that she did make to this council and to extend our condolences to the family.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Just to pick up on pretty much what all the members have said, I had the privilege of working with Pat here when I was chairman of the Adult Services and Health Commission, and if anybody had the knowledge, you asked Pat, because she knew pretty much everything around it, so she'd be very, very sadly missed. Okay, moving on. To receive apologies. Any apologies? Councillor Jones. No.
Yes, I've got apologies from Councillors Mitchell and Tuplin, and Councillor Hurd will join us when she's travelled back from training. Okay, Councillor Jennings. Oh, there you go. Good timing.
Yes, Mr Mayor, Councillors Nath and Latham.
Okay, Councillor Redford.
Mr Mayor, Councillor Roberts.
Councillor Roberts. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. To receive declarations of interest. Councillor Repton.
Yes, in document 9D, a personal interest.
Okay, anybody else?
Document 10 and 10A, personal interest.
10A, you say?
10A and 10.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Item 3, to approve the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 15th of July 2009. Sorry, Councillor Jones.
Can I just formally move those?
Okay, all those in favour? Okay, that's moved. To receive any announcements from the Mayor. A couple of announcements. One, I'm very pleased to announce the East Midlands in Bloom competition, and I'll read this out. Spondon have won the East Midlands in Bloom Silver Gilt for the best urban community in the East Midlands. The Village Improvement Committee, Spondon councillors and the people of Spondon would like to thank the council officers for their help, guidance and assistance in the entry. There has been a true partnership between the committee, the residents and the council, all working together to make Spondon such a lovely place to live and work. Thank you. Well done. Cool. I'm pleased to announce our new Chief Exec, Mr. Adam Wilkinson at the back there. Well, welcome. Facially challenged, Councillor Redfern. A couple of other things. I hate to miss opportunities to promote some of the Mayor's charities. One's on Sunday, which is a sponsored motorbike round, meeting at Markeaton Park at 10 o'clock, actually riding around Derby from 1 o'clock. So any budding motorcyclists, scooter riders, anything else, please get in touch, more the merrier. We've also got a golf tournament, any budding golfers? Crazy, you still get it through the windmill, ring the bell. Which is on Wednesday at Sinfin, which is one of our fine courses in the city of Derby, and that's on Wednesday, so anybody interested in that. Other announcements, usual thing, please turn all mobile phones off. We did have a couple go off last time. And please, Mr. Carter, Michael Carter, no Madam Mayors tonight. Oh. I do have my charity box down here, okay. So thanks for that. I do believe Councillor Williamson has a bit of an announcement to make.
Yeah, thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Mayor. This will be a surprise to Councillor Bolton, but I'm pleased to be able to reveal this evening that Councillor Bolton has been awarded for the third time, which I think is a bit of a record, the Councillor of the Year Award by the Derby DACP. And I'd like to take this opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to present this to Councillor Bolton and place on record my thanks to her and the thanks on behalf of the tenants of Derby that you've done such a great job on their behalf. Well done.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for that. Item 5, to receive any statements from members of the Council Cabinet. I believe there are none. To receive any questions from the public to members of the Council Cabinet and the answers to those questions. We have 2 speakers. Okay, I'd like to invite up Dorothy Skittrett, please. The question is to Councillor Carr.
Skritek, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, Skritek. Sorry, Dorothy Skritek. To Councillor Carr on Council commitment to climate change.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are numerous and unsustainable climate changing planning applications in at the moment, including 2 incinerators, one for Sinfin, one for Spondon, and the waste transfer site. All of these are going to increase pollution in Derby and carbon dioxide emissions. Over 200,000 tonnes of CO2 will be emitted by the 2 burners every year. Yet DEFRA and the Environment Agency agree that recycling saves more CO2 than incineration. These developments will be recommended by council officers who are in the unenviable position of fostering the business relationships with the incinerator developers through contracts agreed between the City and County Council. Is the City Council really serious about climate change?
Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, Dorothy. All planning applications that are submitted to the Council will be evaluated on their own merit by the Council's planning system. It's therefore inappropriate for me to comment any further on the individual submissions. To take your second point, the Council is very serious, definitely very serious about climate change. This is why, along with the other local authorities in Derbyshire, we have committed to increase our combined recycling composting rate and have set a target of 55% recycling by 2020. Landfill is the least desirable method for disposal of the residual household waste. I'd probably use the US term, which I think is more descriptive, trash, which we cannot currently, with any viable technology, recycle. This goes to landfill and creates methane, which is over 20 times more potent as a global warming gas than carbon dioxide. Using thermal technologies to generate energy from this waste will produce carbon dioxide, but not methane, giving a massive overall benefit in reducing the need for other fossil fuels needed to generate this energy and reducing the production of methane through landfill, as I said. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
As the incinerator is only going to be, one of them is only going to be 14% efficient and the other approximately 18%. At 70% recycling, which is what some Derby wards are already reaching, that's a saving of 200,000 tonnes of CO2, yet the plant is, one of the plants is only supposed to save 48,000 tonnes. I've recently received questions put by the Climate Change Commission to the incinerator developers, which didn't include asking about the full emission burdens of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide.
Sorry, is this leading to a supplementary question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Can you get to that then, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I would like to ask the Council and the Climate Change Commission to ask the developers what is the full greenhouse gas burden from the 2 incinerators. This question doesn't seem to have been asked. Therefore, I question what is the point of the Climate Change Commission.
Councillor Carr.
I'm a little confused as to what the actual question is, but the point of the Climate Change Commission is to challenge and question all of us very closely on all the actions we take in reducing our carbon emissions. I'll just make a couple of other points. No ward in Derby is anywhere near 70% to my knowledge, and nitrogen dioxide is not a greenhouse gas.
It is actually, Councillor.
Sorry, you've asked your question and he's answered it, so thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much, thank you. Next question is from Linda Winter to Councillor Allen. And it's for the question is on the outdoor play area at Shawstart. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to ask why, after 2 years of being promised that the outdoor play area from Sure Start on Cockayne Street in Allington is still exposed to the back of Brindley Court and all the antics that go on there.
Okay, thanks. And that's to Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question is slightly different to that written, but it's substantially the same, so I'll give the answer that I prepared before. The garden and outdoor play area at the Osmaston Allington Children's Centre has a strong, rigid, close mesh fence, approximately 10 feet high, where it shares a boundary with the vehicle access to the rear of Brindley Court. At the initial registration of the childcare, Ofsted were happy with the outdoor play space and fencing and haven't, on subsequent inspections or visits, suggested anything additional. The current owners of Brindley Court have removed shrubs from their side of that boundary. A concern has been expressed about the line of sight into the nursery garden. The programme manager has discussed this with the Children and Young People's Department. The Department's Childcare and Family Learning Service are currently looking at whether any alterations to the fencing are needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a supplementary to that?
Well, yeah, I would like to say something about that. The fact that although it is fenced and it is probably secure, the children can see and people can see in. And as somebody that works with children, I really do think that is unacceptable.
Okay, I think that's more of a statement than a question, but thank you. Okay, and you've got another question to Councillor Kerr. Excuse me. Councillor Carr, sorry, on Planning Department officers.
Yeah. In view of all the...
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
My mistake. Sorry, continue.
In view of all the publicity about Citygate and all the rest of the mistakes that's been made by the Planning Department, can you tell me if anybody's been held accountable or any disciplinary action has been taken against anybody in the Planning Department?
Okay, it's slightly different from the original question, but Councillor Kerr, and I was correct, it did say Councillor Carr on my papers, so it's Mr Foot's problem. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And again, I will answer the question that I'd been originally provided with. The Citygate application has become well known, having had massive coverage in the local media, so I won't go into detail about it. But the application was the subject of maladministration by our officers, and the Corporate Director, Regeneration and Community, immediately informed the Ombudsman that this was the case, and that the Council would do everything possible to cooperate with the Ombudsman in investigating the case. You will know that there were a further 60 planning applications which had fallen foul of the same error in that they were not fully advertised in a local newspaper. These were also investigated by planning officers and reported back via a cross-party member panel to the Council's Planning Control Committee. All of these reports went to the main committee on the 30th of July. The 60 applications were also scrutinised by Trevor Roberts Associates, who are independent planning consultants. Their appointment was endorsed by the Ombudsman, and they agreed with the conclusions of the Council's planning officers and the cross-party members panel. There has been no disciplinary action against any officers in our planning division because nothing has happened that contravened the Council's Code of Conduct for officers. The officers involved are part of a very dedicated team, and indeed they were extremely upset both personally and professionally when they realised the mistake that had been made. The Ombudsman welcomed the fact that we had made the mistake known publicly as quickly as possible, and also acknowledged that this was a genuine mistake and was not made in any way to enable officers to gain financially or otherwise from the maladministration. You will know that we ran through the application process again with the Citygate application and sought views and representations from residents and other neighbours across a wide area. These were reported back to the Planning Committee under the scrutiny of the Ombudsman. The committee decided that the officer's decision in relation to the planning application would stand and that the Ombudsman accepted this as a correct conclusion. In the case of the other 60 applications, the cross-party member panel came to the same conclusion, and the failure to advertise in a local newspaper made no difference to the outcome of the applications, and Planning Control Committee accepted the view. So, in summary, no officers have been subject to disciplinary action because this was a genuine mistake made by an otherwise very professional and dedicated team, and that once the matter had been fully investigated internally by the Ombudsman and by an independent planning consultant, there was no disciplinary case to be answered.
Thank you for that. Do you have a supplementary to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It is an actual question as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Can I ask what procedures have been put in place to ensure that this never happens again, to reassure the residents, not just of Derby, but of Alveston, that this sort of thing won't happen again?
Councillor Kerr.
I think it would probably be helpful to have the full details that was presented to the Planning Control Committee, but briefly the information being provided to the representatives, to ourselves as councillors, has been made clearer and more accessible, and the guidance within the department has been made clearer, and the training has gone on to ensure that staff are very clear as what the responsibilities are. But we can get a copy of the full details to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you just turn your buzz off before you go? Thanks. Cheers. Thanks. Okay, moving on to item 7, to receive any written questions from the business functions of the Derbyshire Police Authority, Fire Authority and Derby Homes. There are no questions. Item 8, to receive any written questions from non-council cabinet members to members of the council cabinet and the answers to those questions. We have, I believe, 1 or 2. The first one is from Councillor Graves to Councillor Kerr on the City Gate affair. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we've just had a question from a member of the public. So it's, I just wonder what extra answers that Councillor Kerr can give onto this, particularly as she's already told the press the outcome of the question before we've actually brought it to this chamber. However, after the debacle of the 60-plus planning applications that were not advertised properly as per legal procedures and the questionable nature of posting, I believe professional officers received further training. In my original letter regarding the Citygate affair, one of the things I asked for was suspension and investigation of responsible officers. Can you advise the Council what disciplinary measures were taken during and after this period? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kerr.
This shows creativity. Our society is often quick to rush to apportion blame and seek retribution, as you are suggesting is needed here. But is this appropriate? If an historic error has been made, then the error needs correcting. If the system doesn't achieve its aims, then the system needs reviewing. If there is a lack of knowledge, then training is required. If there is a resultant loss, then this might be compensated for. However, if there is negligence or laziness or intentional wrongdoing which has caused the mistake, then disciplinary action may well be appropriate. In the Citygate issue, there was a table of actions which did not match the agreed procedures, an error going back several years during which there had been many changes of staff. There were councillors who did not react to the weekly lists of applications sufficiently, and processes are being changed to make this easier. There was inconsistency with compliance with national legislation, probably due to the mismatch with agreed procedures. Training was the solution. And a detailed and independent assessment of the decisions was conducted, and neither Citygate nor other applications were deemed to have been in error, so there was no difference in the outcome. I cannot see, therefore, what value there would be in disciplinary action.
Do you have a supplementary to that, Councillor Graves?
I didn't, until I heard what Councillor Kerr said. It's quite easy to pass the buck, Mr. Mayor, and also the fact that she didn't take my question in the genuine way that it was presented. I did referring to my question, the fact we were talking about legal procedures. That means they're set down in law. Now, what I was asking was what disciplinary measures were taken during or after that period. And if she said that they felt that enough was taken from the training, then that would have been acceptable. But to suggest that I'm looking for retribution is wrong, Mr. Mayor. I haven't got a question.
Okay, thank you. Next one is from Councillor Graves again to Councillor Jones on the Bolton Neighbourhood Forum. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The neighbourhood agenda was created to allow greater access and greater participation in our community. I believe this has been a huge success, especially in Alveston Ward, where we accept every active member of the community and value the views of everyone. Are you aware, Mr. Mayor, that Bolton Neighbourhood Ward has 2 couples who are equally active within the community, yet only eligible for half a vote each? Do you not think that individuals are an entity in their own right, and as such should be entitled to a whole vote each? When did this council decide that half votes form part of democracy? Have the 3 Bolton councillors agreed to this disgraceful state of affairs? Will you correct this travesty of democracy and ensure each member is granted their entitlement to 1 vote each?
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Graves. I have liaised with the neighbourhood manager, and it is correct that we currently have 2 couples on the Bolton Neighbourhood Board. Neighbourhood boards should be as representative as possible of the whole ward, considering the geographical spread of the ward, ethnicity, age and gender, etc. of members, so that the board can best reflect the community views of that area. Ideally seeking to identify at least 1 representative from each voting district within a ward. The role of residents on the neighbourhood boards is to represent the whole of their neighbourhood, not just a single interest group, and they need to do that with commitment and passion. They should have a real understanding and vision about their community's hopes and priorities and work alongside councillors and the public services to give their neighbourhood a strong and powerful voice. In the 2 cases that are highlighted here, both couples applied to come on board individually, which it was felt would not best represent the wider area. After much discussion and wanting to accommodate as much as possible these interested parties, it was considered the best option would be to invite both individuals, and all of them as couples, in other words, in a joint capacity. This would allow both individuals to contribute towards discussions and help to enable the board to better reach consensus on key decisions. It was recognised, however, that where this was not possible, it would be necessary to undertake a vote to achieve a decision. Then this could only be workable if the couple voted in their joint capacity, i.e. that they have 1 vote between them. It should be noted that it is only 1 member of the couple is at a meeting, then they can still vote, and this would still count as 1 vote. I've been assured that this was explained to both couples. They agreed this, and this was agreed before they came onto the board in question. This question raises a healthy debate regarding representation and membership of boards, and it's probably appropriate that the neighbourhood manager goes back to the couples and to the ward councillors concerned to discuss this further at that board meeting. Thank you.
You have a supplementary to that, Councillor Graves?
I have indeed, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to point out, Councillor Jones, that on Alveston board we have 2 couples, man and wife, two couples, but they all get a vote each. That's because we value them as individuals, and we don't assume that because you're man and wife that you might actually vote the same way as your partner. And I think it's disgraceful that in the Bolton ward that they assume that's the case. I agree with representation.
Yeah, I mean, we're just going over the original. Have you got a supplementary, Councillor?
Will you reinstate, not reinstate, will you state that each person will get a vote individually?
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. I think the matter is most appropriately dealt with in the Bolton ward, as my understanding from the information that I've got before me is that they decided how it was to be dealt with, and I therefore think it appropriately goes back to Bolton for them to decide how to deal with this matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Councillor Harwood to Councillor Nater. Question is additional equipment on Oakwood Park.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Harwood.
In view of the state of the play areas that the Liberal Democrats inherited from the previous regime, the splendid news regarding the new and renovated play areas throughout the city is certainly good news for the citizens of Derby. In my ward, Oakwood, we need urgently additional equipment for the teenagers on Oakwood Park. Can the Cabinet member give me any assurances that this will be considered, please?
Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Harwood. It's good news that the Play Builders funding has enabled us to accelerate the renovation of the city's play areas. And by the time the programme comes to an end in March 2011, most of the city's play areas will have been renovated. New junior and toddler play areas were constructed on Oakwood Park in the spring 2008. As part of the programme, playground renovations, and after consultation with local teenagers, the youth shelter was built, later in 2008. As the funding was limited, the consultation asked young people to choose between the youth shelter and a piece of equipment designed for teenagers. They opted for the shelter, which was erected near the sports wall, which is other facility on the park, aimed at teenagers. And I know you, Councillor Howard, played a major part in engaging the teenagers. Regarding further improvements to play facilities, the play areas to be renovated under the Play Builder programme have already been selected. Selection was based on a combination of condition of existing equipment along with consultation in the area around each play area. Oakwood Park was not involved in the consultation because its new play area had only been constructed. However, if funding for additional facilities for teenagers were to become available, then Oakwood Park, as one of the city's district parks, would certainly be considered.
Do you have a supplementary to that, please?
No, I've not got a
Councillor
supplementary.
Howard, or is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Thank you. I haven't got a
I
supplementary.
thought I misheard it, yes.
Well,
Do you have a supplementary to that?
No, I haven't got a supplementary, but I'd like to thank the Councillor for that reply. The Cabinet member.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next question is Councillor Jackson to Councillor Nater on the Allington Library opening hours. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I was delighted when, as Mayor, I had the privilege of opening Allington Library after funding had been obtained by the Labour-controlled council. However, this pleasure has been somewhat diminished when I find that the opening hours are the lowest in the city, despite recent Cabinet papers reporting that this library has been a resounding success. Mickleover Library is open for 43.5 hours per week and Blakeries 42.5, compared with Allington Library's 27 hours. Can Councillor Nater justify to the council taxpayers of Allington why they receive a much poorer library service than those in Mickleover and Blakeries wards?
Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Sadly, Councillor Jackson, clearly you have not done your research to your question, and I'm sure that you're going to be embarrassed by my response. The Council's Cabinet, made up of Labour and Conservative Coalition, agreed on 20th of March 2007 to submit a bid to the Big Lottery Fund for new libraries in Allington, Chelliston and Mackworth. The same Labour Conservative Cabinet meeting were asked to agree the level of revenue funding that the Council would provide should the bid be successful. The supporting information given to Cabinet at the time made it clear in paragraph 1.14 that the level of funding being requested would be sufficient to provide 27 hours of opening at each new libraries. Both the principle of submitting a bid and the revenue funding necessary to run the new libraries were duly agreed by Labour Conservative Cabinet of the day. I infer to the same Labour Conservative Cabinet which approved and took credit for the Big Lottery bid fund and also agreed the level of opening hours for Allington, Chelliston and Mackworth libraries. The total additional revenue budget agreed by Labour Conservative Cabinet in March 2007, including premises, ICT and book fund, as well as the opening hour costs, were £299,000. This is a substantial amount of new money and was judged at the time to be the limit of what was affordable for the Council. This in context in which Allington's library's 27 opening hours were set, and in the view of Council's overall financial position then and now, I find no reason to disagree with the Labour Conservative Cabinet's decision at that time. However, I share Councillor Jackson's obvious delight at the success of the new Allington Library, which is attractive, vibrant and heavily used by local people. I am pleased to confirm that the opening hours of all Council's libraries are to be set to be reviewed next summer as part of the preparation for setting of the budget for 2011-12. If at that time all the data available to us suggests that Allington's opening hours are out of line with other parts of the network, we, the Liberal Democrats group, shall look to rectify the situation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jackson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm sure you'll be surprised to hear that I'm not in the least bit embarrassed by that. But as the Cabinet Member for Leisure and Culture, will you please give me the assurance that you will take 3 hours each from Mickleover and Blakeries and give them to the people of Allington. Then they'll just have 6 hours more. This will make a huge difference to Allington in view of the great success that it's been, but will make very little difference to Bladegrieves and Mickleover. Can you give me that assurance, please, Councillor Nater?
Councillor Nater.
No.
Okay. Next question is Councillor Bayliss to Councillor Kerr on the Elveston District refurbishment. Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could the Cabinet member please tell me when, on what day, in what month and year, Stage 2 of the Elveston District Centre refurbishment will start? And when the residents of Elveston can look forward to the start of Phases 3 and 4?
Councillor Nater? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kerr. I'm a bit ahead of myself here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sadly, Councillor, I can no more give you dates now than I could when you asked me a very similar question at our last meeting in July. But neither would my predecessor in this role, your colleague Councillor Banwaite, have been able to do so. District centre refurbishments were not included in future years of the capital programme under Labour, and nor were they included in the very city-centric public realm programme. You will be aware that the Liberal Democrats sought to widen the vision for Derby's development from the city centre to encompass the whole city last year. This proposed change to the Council's priorities, which might have made identifying funding for district centres easier, was unfortunately defeated. I think that you were probably one of those voting against. Not deterred, I have continued to seek sources of funding to continue with Elveston District Centre's improvements. As a result, you will be aware that the second half of the first stage was completed earlier this year, coming in slightly under budget. Incidentally, when the project was started under Labour, the finance that had been identified was inadequate for even the first half of the first stage, and the rushed start meant that work had to be repeated as materials were not all available in time, which added to the cost. However, looking forward, I am still hopeful that it will be possible to identify some funding from the Derby Growth Point for further work later this year or early next. The amount of funding available will determine which section would be constructed.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bayliss, do you have a supplementary?
Of course, Mr. Mayor. Would you agree the more times you stand here and squirm at length, it has to be said, at your inability to answer the question, the poorer and weaker your excuses become? If this was Lib Dem priority, it would have been done by now. Just look at Gayton School.
We do need a question there.
Yes, wouldn't it?
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I don't think I'm squirming, actually. I feel quite embarrassed about your repetitive questions and the fact you don't even build on the previous response to actually ask for a better response the following time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bayliss, next question to Councillor Nater on the Elveston Park changing rooms. Councillor Bayliss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for the record, I never feel embarrassed about speaking about Elveston and asking questions. The question is, can the Cabinet member tell me when work on the new changing rooms will start in Elveston Park?
This time it is to Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Councillor Bayliss. The Football Foundation requested in July 2009 that the application for the grants towards the new changing rooms at Elveston Park would be resubmitted with further sporting information. This information was sent to Football Foundation at the end of August, and the application is currently being assessed by the Football Foundation staff. A meeting has been arranged with the Football Foundation yesterday to go through the application and supporting information. Following the meeting, Foundation will be able to advise when the application will be considered by the panel and the board and decision expected. The design team of the architects and other consultants have been appointed to complete the detailed design of the project, set up to tender stage. The programme is as follows. Completion of detailed design and contract information October 29/09. Tender was sent out in November 09. Tender returned in January 2010. Contract award and construction. Subject to approval of the funding by the Football Foundation, the proposed programme for the award of contract and construction periods is as follows. Contract award February 2010. Start on site March 2010. Completion August 2010. The contract award and construction dates may need to be revised depending on when the Football Foundations make their decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bayliss, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Well read, by the way, Councillor Nater. And if you want some news on how to construct your plinth, which I think is the wrong way around, just see Councillor Graves. The excuses on this are terrible, Mr Mayor. Why are there more excuses? This bridge should be delivered this year. It shouldn't be next year. Don't tell me, let me guess, this is not a Lib Dem priority, is it?
Thank you. Any response to that, Councillor? No? Okay. Next question is Councillor Graves, again to Councillor Nater, on the Football Foundation funding application. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's on a similar theme to the last question. Councillor Nater, I would like to remind you of your words from the last full council meeting when I asked about the progress of Alveston Park refurbishment. You uttered in your reply, and this is a quote, "The funding application, I think it's be looking at it before the end of the year. I can't quite be certain but what I will do is get back to you on that." If you check the webcast of the meeting of the 15th of July 2009 and your supplementary answer to when the Football Foundation funding application is to be considered, you volunteered and promised to let me have that information. It is now the 9th of September, some 8 weeks later, and you seem to reveal how you treat the promises you make. Why do you find it so hard to keep the promises you make?
Thank you for that. Councillor Nater.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. In response to your question, I thought I'd made it clear to you that we were still awaiting the Football Foundation's deliberations on Alveston Park refurbishment. In order not to duplicate any response, these issues have already been explained in detail in my response to Councillor Bayliss' question regarding Alveston Park changing rooms. I am slightly bemused by your question, as it appears to be creating an issue which, as previously stated, is being addressed. Thank you.
Councillor Gray, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Quite the opposite, Councillor Nater. I'm asking you when the Football Foundation are considering our funding bid, and you still haven't given me that date.
So, Councillor Nater.
Mr Mayor, I think I've already answered that question.
Sorry, I don't think you had, so.
Said it's been addressed as of yesterday, and we'll get the detail of it within, I should say, a couple of days. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to turn your mic off, please? Okay, next question, Councillor Turner to Councillor Troop on the proposed traveller site area extension. Councillor Turner.
Councillor Troop, your answers to me at councillor questions on the subject of an extended Russell Street traveller site fail to use the word yes in response. Yet it is clear from your response to the questions and your officer's subsequent response that the Liberal Democrat Cabinet are intent on preventing the area around the proposed site being allocated to any other use. Given that the regeneration of the area through the master planning process is of supreme importance and that you have failed to consult the residents in any way, are you going to support the residents in their opposition to the proposed traveller site area extension?
Thank you. Councillor Troop.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Turner. As I have stated previously, the Council has no plans at this stage to extend the proposed traveller site. It would, however, be inappropriate for me to rule this out categorically in case it was to become apparent through the detailed design stages that a modest extension would create a better scheme. I believe that it is important to create the best development that we reasonably can, as this will help the scheme to have a better relationship with the surrounding community. I agree that the master planning exercise is of key importance here, and it is through the master planning process that I would envisage the long-term uses of the land surrounding the proposed traveller site being determined. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner, do you have a supplementary to that?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Troop, I know, has as much awareness as the other councillors, the councillors in Sinfin Ward, that building the confidence of the people in the local area in relation to the master plan is of supreme importance. So why, although you have no plan, and to me, a plan is something that you are going to
You need to get to the question, Councillor Turner, to be fair to everybody else.
OK, I'll just summarise it. Use of the word plan in the answer is just a way of evading answering the question. So do we take it yet again that you're not saying yes or no, but you won't consult the residents?
Can you not please shout from the public gallery? Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Troop.
Well, as I said last time, I continue to be disappointed at the negative attitude taken by particularly Councillors Turner and Shanker on the regeneration of the Osmaston area. To claim that there is no consultation going on is quite incorrect, and they know it is. We have a dedicated consultation officer in place who's dealing specifically with the Osmaston regeneration. Various meetings have been organised with the community, talking over the possibilities for the area, and those continue to take place. The visits have been organised to other regeneration sites so that the residents can experience what might be possible in Osmaston. I think this clearly shows that we are consulting with the residents, and to claim that we're not is just incorrect. I stand by my original reply on our position about extending the site.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Councillor Shanker to Councillor Troop on the Elton Road and Glossop Street housing area. Councillor Shanker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Comprehensive consultation by Groundwork on the future use of the cleared Elton Road and Glossop Street housing areas showed that the residents supported the use of the Elton Road site for open space. That was supported in the Council's response to that consultation. Why have you ignored the residents' consulted views by proposing to build at the site that they wanted as open space?
Thank you. Councillor Troop.
Thank you, Councillor Shanker. The Groundwork consultation demonstrated that residents wanted both open space and new housing development on the Elton Road and Glossop Street areas. It was undertaken more than 5 years ago, before the current master planning area had been conceived. The Council is currently undertaking further and now more relevant consultation in relation to the master planning process, and the proposed new housing development is receiving much support, with only very few residents raising concerns. The residents are generally supporting the view that a high-quality new housing development will provide evidence on the ground of what can be achieved and will bring with it much-needed confidence in the area. The Council has today heard that its bid for new housing at both Elton Road and Cowsley Road has been approved. In the case of Elton Road, the scheme will not only provide much-needed additional affordable housing at a time when the Council faces unprecedented levels of housing need, but it will also enable the laying out of the remaining undeveloped land as public open space. Without the new housing development, the adjacent area of land could not be laid out as open space at this time and would have to remain fenced off and unused. The Council will undertake further consultation with residents in relation to the detailed layout of the adjacent public open space. This consultation will take place in the context of the wider master planning exercise, which will, in the longer term, deliver further areas of public open space elsewhere within the Osmaston area. Thank you.
Okay, do you have a supplement to that, Councillor Shanker?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Can you therefore give categoric assurance that when residents get consulted, you and your Cabinet will actually listen to the views, unlike you've done previously, ignoring the views of the residents and, in fact, this chamber?
Councillor Troop.
I can give that assurance, yes.
Okay, that concludes the questions from non-Council Cabinet members to members of the Council Cabinet. Moving on to item 9, to consider the following minutes and recommendations of the Council Cabinet dated 28th of July and 1st of September 2009, requiring the approval of the Council. Document 9. Going through it, 4609. Councillor Repton, you showed, and Councillor Bayliss. Yeah, we'll go through each one first. Councillor Bayliss.
Yeah, I want to speak
on 4609.
4609, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I think one should recognise today that the Labour government's actually Kickstart scheme has, Councillor Troop has announced in the press, delivered 33 council houses to this city. I think we should realise that this is an attempt to inject money into the building sector, which is hard done to at the moment. There is also other good news in the city that Derby Homes are building their first Almo houses. There's 40 of those being built. And also the thing that worries me is that there are two schemes. One is the phase 2 of the Kickstart initiative, which I'm afraid that at the moment I'm told there's only 6 houses being proposed for building from the scheme put forward at the moment to the government. There is time, of course, for the council cabinet member to amend that scheme and be a bit more visionary and maybe make it 60 or 70 houses, which is a possibility. And the other problem is that there's the PFI scheme, which I'm told that includes part of my ward, part of Spondon and a few other people, is actually so badly behind it's unlikely to be delivered till next year. I wonder if the council cabinet member could reassure me that he has got some vision and we can actually do something in terms of the stage 2 Kickstart scheme and put a bid in for 60 or 70 houses, or if not that many, certainly make it into double figures and do something as far as you can, and accept that there are issues with the PFI scheme, to expedite that as well, because we are, as he said in this chamber before, 10,000 people on the waiting list and people out there need these houses desperately, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on that? No? Okay, moving on to 53-09, Contract and Financial Procedure Matter Report. Councillor Hickson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to ask a question, please, under Standing Order CP21, which I think need to be answered by Councillor Jones. What I want to know is, in terms of the item at 5309, whether this proposal is going to be cost neutral to the council, or whether there's going to be an ongoing charge to council taxpayers, and if so, what are the anticipated costs of that in the revenue accounts?
Councillor Jones.
I don't have that information to hand, and we're going to need to come back to you to answer that specific question.
Councillor Hickson.
Well, a further question then under Standing Order CP21 then, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it beggars belief that the Leader of the Council and the Chairman of Council Cabinet can't answer a question so fundamental as this on an important aspect of funding that's going to affect the Council's revenue budget. Can she therefore answer, if she doesn't know what the costs are going to be, what the projected term of those costs are likely to be in terms of the mortgage that the Council Cabinet are intending to take out on behalf of this Council to raise this prudential borrowing?
Councillor Jones.
Again, that's quite a technical question, and it is, and it's something that we will have to come back to you with the precise figures.
Well, Mr. Mayor,
can we have a bit of order, please? Councillor Hickson.
Under Standing Order CP21, I mean, it makes you wonder, actually, what was discussed at Council Cabinet. If these questions, which seem to me fairly simple financial questions, cannot be answered, what is the point of them being debated at Cabinet? If the Leader of the Council doesn't know the answers to these questions, which are fairly fundamental, what is she doing sitting adjudicating on them? In terms of the moving on now, in terms of the syntax in the wording of 5309, it says to recommend to Council that additional prudential borrowing be undertaken, which seems to indicate in the future, because there's a future tense implied there. But then it goes on to say that it was lent, which implies the passive tense. So which is which? Has it already been undertaken, or is it going to be undertaken?
Councillor Jones, would you like to reply to that?
Mr. Mayor, point of clarification. It's just been pointed out to me that the two sets of wording, the wording under Council New Build and the wording under the Contracts and Financial Procedure Matters report, have actually been swapped over. I mean, I agree, it's still a relevant question, but it's to different bits there. So there's an error on here which we'll have to amend when we get to that point in the agenda.
Mr Mayor, then, if I may, asking again under item CP21, and in a way, I mean, I've got to the bottom of what I wanted to get to the bottom of, that the wording and the intention in this minute are erroneous and cannot be approved by the Council. So will the Leader of the Council now withdraw these items and then bring them back in a proper manner to the next Council meeting?
Councillor Jones?
I think I'd like to seek Mr Foot's advice on this.
Okay, a bit of order. Mr Foot.
So I think, Mr Mayor, the item is before Council to determine. And it's for Council to decide whether this needs to be referred back or not, and then vote upon that motion if that amendment were to be made. But I think for clarification, if we are looking at the wording that appears under 5309, that should actually be attached to the Council new build, as I understand it, and therefore should be read in the context of report number 9A. And I think from looking at report number 9A, the answer should be found therein.
Does that clear it for you, Councillor Jones?
It isn't whether it's clear enough for Councillor Jones, it's whether it's clear enough for members of this Council. We're being asked tonight to approve the very specific wording that's laid down in 5309. Now, we've been told that it's not right, that it doesn't express the intention that it was required to express, and rather than try and cobble together now to get it right, when it's clearly been bungled, it needs to be referred back and reconsidered and brought back to Council in a proper form. We cannot be given reports and given minutes that are inaccurate, fallacious and designed to help us to make a decision which is based on a misapprehension of the facts. It's not on.
Mr Fort.
There is the financial implications in the report are set out there in paragraphs 1 to 1.215. If Council are not prepared to accept the report that is put before them, then a member needs to move reference back, and then if that is seconded, it is put to the vote, and then Council decides on that basis.
Councillor Bolton, did you wish to speak on it as well? I've got you down to speak, and Councillor Jennings after.
I did wish to speak, but I think we've got to sort out this anomaly
okay,
before
that's fine.
we progress.
Somebody going to move the... yeah, Councillor Jennings?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I formally move that we refer this back to Cabinet for a further explanation of exactly what's happening, as nobody seems to know.
Okay, who's seconding that?
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Kerr.
Mr Mayor and fellow councillors, I think we seem to be making heavy weather of this. We've already heard other people speak tonight about the need for additional housing in the city. The report that was referenced
Sorry,
here
Councillor, I mean...
on this.
The motion is put forward and then they've asked to move it to a vote, so...
May I finish speaking?
No. So, a motion, all those in favour of the... Sorry, I don't know the correct wording on it, Mr Foot, so we cross the I's and...
The amendment should be in writing, but because it's so simple, it's fairly easy to put to members, and it will be to move that minute 4609 relating to Council new build be referred back to Cabinet for further consideration.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, shouldn't that also be 5309? Sorry, and 5309.
Just one sec.
Well, it's for Council to say. I think we've already passed 4609, but that was transposed with the wrong wording. So it's for Council to decide whether they wish to have both of them referred back, or only the one relating to Council new build, which goes with the wording which appears under 5309.
Councillor Jennings.
Mr Mayor, the actual one that we want referring back is the money for the £1.75 million that is down, that nobody can seem to explain what's going to happen and what future cost, what future burden that's going to bring to the council. Until that can be explained, I think that it's only right and proper that this is referred back to Cabinet so that they can give Council the full information required for us to base our decision on. We couldn't possibly take a vote to approve this without knowing the future costs of this scheme.
Yeah, well, what Michael Ford was saying, do you want to include 5309 in that as well? Okay. Yep. So, okay, we're moving to the vote. Sorry, no, we're moving to the vote. Okay, all those in favour of deferring it? Sorry, let me get my... referring it back to Cabinet. Those against? Okay, we need to move on to the next item. Sorry, Councillor Bolton, did you want to speak on that one?
Yes, if this 5309 is staying, Mr Mayor, yes, I would then, please. Document 9B, Contract and Financial Matters Report. And obviously on the agenda we need to disregard the wording underneath because it is attached to the wrong agenda item. But nevertheless, I do want to speak about the contract waivers within the Children and Young People's Department, which is outlined on page 3. And it's pertaining to the contract for Action for Children. It says in the report under 316 that the position is complicated, and having read this document a few times, it still remains complicated to me. But can I ask the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People his thoughts and ideas on the revised specification being agreed with Action for Children, and what assurances he can give that we receive, and most importantly, the children we give, get value for money?
Councillor Allen, respond to that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Councillor Bolton says, it is a complicated arrangement, and I have every confidence in the arrangement that we've got described in these paragraphs. So, unless there are specific questions that the Council wants to pursue with me outside the meeting, that's fine, but I've got every confidence in this report. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak on it? No?
Yeah, I would like to say that that answer isn't to my satisfaction. So can I have a report?
Sorry, you can't speak again on it now. I've been told by Mr. Foote.
He doesn't know the answer ends.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on. So we need 67.
On a point of order, I asked the question under CP20, which wasn't answered, and now the Councillor being asked to approve an item on here which we've been told by the Leader of the Council is erroneous, or she doesn't know. And I just think that this puts members of the Council in a very invidious position as far as voting or approving this minute is concerned, because under the financial provisions of the Local Government Act, if I remember them rightly, and Mr Foote will correct me if I'm wrong, if councillors make a decision on a financial question, which 5309 is, without being certain or clear of the full facts, which we're not, the Leader of the Council isn't, and neither, I suspect, are the majority of members of the Council, then members of the Council themselves become financially liable.
Mr Mayor, if I could say, on that particular issue, as I tried to point out, the report that needs to be considered by Council is labelled 9A. This is the report that went to the Council Cabinet on the subject of Council New Build. If members look at the financial implications of that report, which were approved by the Director of Resources, you will see that all the financial matters are dealt with there. And so far as I'm aware, and Mr McClure will, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, there are no financial matters of concern that are pointed out into that report. So certainly as far as I am concerned, unless Don nods furiously at me, I think the matter before Council is capable of a decision today, and surcharge no longer does exist for local government members insofar as that is relevant. No, but it was financial responsibility, which is the same thing.
Well, the personal explanation, surcharge and personal responsibility in terms of the requirements on councillors under the Local Government Act are completely different. In terms of personal responsibility, for us as voting members and full members of this council, that's covered by the Code of Conduct and the Standards Board. Nothing to do with surcharge. Mr Foote, I regret to say, is addressing himself to the wrong issue, and I perhaps didn't explain myself properly when I made my earlier contribution. What I'm saying is that we become personally liable in terms of standards of conduct as members of this council if we take decisions without being completely au fait with the facts.
I misunderstood what Councillor Hickson said, obviously, and I apologise for that. But the Code of Conduct relating to members' behaviour does not actually cover this issue, so far as I am aware. And certainly I cannot think how that could be brought in. So as far as I am concerned, I think I am content that members have the full facts before them to make a decision this evening. It is for Council themselves to decide whether they're happy to proceed on that basis.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And while I think it's very regrettable that there's been this confusion in the paragraphs, and I hope this sort of thing doesn't happen again, I do believe that we do have the information that we need in front of us, provided we ignore the wrong paragraphs in our papers. If we go to document 9A, which is referenced against Council New Build, and look at page 6, which is in the Appendix 1, and the financial implications, it clearly says that the loan, and this is the loan for up to 1.6 million, will be repaid from net rental income from letting the properties. So I think it's very clear that how that borrowing will be serviced, and I think in the current climate and the foreseeable climate, new build council homes are likely to be in demand and likely to be occupied virtually 100% of the time. So regarding that issue, Chair, I hope that fellow councillors feel assured that there isn't a financial liability that we'll be stepping into. Regarding the second schemes to deal with Derby Live, again, there is clear information within document 9B, which is the reference document, but the wrong paragraph, and there the information is on pages 6 and 7, and I think that's fairly clear as well, and there's financial details to the back.
Point of order then, Mr Mayor. Was then Councillor Kerr speaking on 4609, which has already been decided by the Council, or was she speaking on 5309? Because it seemed to me that that contribution was speaking about both, and she can't because 4609 has already been concluded.
Councillor Kerr.
As a point of explanation, I don't believe any of us have actually voted on any of those points because they will come under the motion which is still to be debated.
Thank you. Moving on out to 6709, the Revenue Budget, Capital Budget and Corporate Planning Strategy, document 9D. Anybody wish to speak on that? Councillor Repton.
I'm referring to page 14, item 3.45, travel plan. Contained there, quite worryingly, is just 18 words which refer to a reduction of some £800,000. And I don't believe that this full council is being given what the implications of such a cut could be to not only to members of staff of this council but to members of the public. The negative impact will be on staff morale, a reduced ability to run their cars on the council's behalf and a reduced service for members of the public. The proposal comes at a time when the costs of motoring are increasing dramatically. And I think this council could end up with an unnecessary potential industrial dispute and disruption of services to members of the public. And I think this council ought at all costs to avoid this. I think also what this council could end up with is problems in terms of staff recruitment and retention. Certainly this council needs to be fully aware of the implications of what's being proposed in their name in terms of the impact on staff and the impact on the public. And I think this potential industrial dispute ought to be avoided at all costs. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Repton. Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, Mr Mayor. On a very similar scheme. The travel plan. In its attempt to introduce the travel plan, or rather implement certain features of the travel plan by this September, the City Council is doing a great disservice to a large proportion of its most loyal, hard-working workforce. It was always the intention within the travel plan, as originally propounded in 2004, that car use would be radically restructured, and this would include abolition of the essential car user allowance. But it was never the intention that this would be accomplished as the City Council now proposes. The phrase that had been used in the travel plan before is withering on the vine, meaning that all new starters would either not receive a car allowance at all, or would receive casual allowance, and those on essential would have to be protected. City Council have been trying to sell the current proposals as environmental and financial, but I believe they are purely financial, and they are a knee-jerk reaction to a situation in which they find themselves as a result of inept financial management. They have to make certain level of cuts and think car users will be an easy target. And these people, Mr Mayor, are the people that actually deliver the service on the ground. They go out there every day talking to service users on the ground, and they're not very highly paid. Where a rather handsome and debonair new chief executive might have a huge salary and he wouldn't notice an essential car user, indeed if he's got one, the people who are actually on the ground delivering the service would notice. I mean, it could mean for some people a £1,500 to £2,000 per annum loss in their income. This makes a massive difference to monthly take-home pay, and some workers suggested that they may have to cancel their car leases and revert to the old Bangor, which completely defeats the object of the exercise in terms of the travel plan. One of the things that the Council was proposing, and I don't know whether they're still going down this route, but a rather draconian route, was they were going to sack everybody and reissue them with contracts the same day. Now, I'm not sure, I'm not up to speed at the moment, they were suggesting that. At one stage, they were offering a huge compensation of £1. And then when they realised that it wouldn't be very popular, they actually offered somebody a day out at some leisure facility in Derbyshire. I think it was Gulliver's Kingdom. How ridiculous. I noticed on some of the job lists as well currently, I mean, it may have changed, but the one I was looking at did have essential car user advertised. And the other thing that alarms me, well, it alarms me even more in terms of, we've been talking about disciplinary action and competence of managers in this authority. When I actually had a briefing about this, it was admitted to me that people on essential car user allowance, the City Council did not have a copy of their driving licence, their insurance, or where applicable, the MOT for every single vehicle on the grey fleet. Well, any company that I work for that had essential car use licence, a few years ago they insisted on that, otherwise they wouldn't pay you anything. This authority allows that to go on at the moment. And that, if you ask me, is very incompetent and very worrying, because there could be potential out there with thousands of people, somebody not having the right insurance or an MOT for a vehicle they should have. This is very serious. And the other thing is quite right, the point that Councillor Repton makes, is that this is extremely divisive. And my point of view comes to the standpoint of the service users, the people we actually are elected to represent. Those people that we're saying you need to go in their houses and turn up in the car at maybe short notice or the early hours in the morning, this will be a problem. And this will be an issue that this council may turn to regret. I think that what's happened here is taking a very sensible programme, a sensible plan, and turning it for fiscal gain. And I think we should be aware of that, Mr Mayor, and we should be opposed to it and watch out for it.
Thank you, Councillor Bass. Next to speak is Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. A few points I need to make in response to that. First, the travel plan and the 800k savings target, and I emphasise the word target because negotiations are still going on, was signed off in this chamber on the 2nd of March in this year's budget, in the current budget. So that's not an issue now. However, negotiations are still going on. It may not come out at 800k, it may or it may not. However, I am not proposing to hold those negotiations with Councillor Bayliss and Repton in this chamber. In response to Councillor Repton, he said, at all costs. Well, I don't accept that it's at all costs. It could be several £1 million at all costs. That's just a nonsense statement, and that's typical of what I come to expect from those benches over there. The documents, he's quite right. We inherited this document situation. When I took over, I discovered that this particular aspect, which is not the case in business, was already in place, that nobody checks documents or something. It's something I've instituted, and as Councillor Rawson will remember, that document, the new health and safety implications of that are going through at the moment through the Personnel Committee, and we will be rectifying that situation. I quite agree with him. It's completely intolerable that nobody checks driving licences, MOTs and so on. That will be sorted. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dinser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is on the same subject of paragraph 3.5 in the travel plan. Just when I attended the cabinet meeting when this paper was discussed, I was approached by one of our employees, a number of our employees, but one in particular, who did highlight the scenario that Councillor Bayliss earlier identified of certain frontline staff who are currently essential users and who will be potentially negatively impacted on the travel plan plans at the moment. So, and in the actual cabinet meeting, I did raise this issue where I highlighted the fact that we had a report which indicated in 1.1 of document 9D, last bullet point on that page 1, that we are, because of the current financial situation and the lower inflation figures, our planned awards of 2.5% pay awards will not be needed on the basis that it's 1.25 required because of the current situation. So I did ask the Cabinet, and Councillor Carr did respond to me that in view of that, we should reconsider, not the whole of the travel plan, because the travel plan is a positive approach in terms of the objectives of the Council, but those particular essential users who are frontline and do a great sterling job for the City Council and the citizens of Derby City, that should be considered in the consultation process, because the travel plan is in the consultation process. So I'd like just confirmation of that acknowledgement which Councillor Carr did give me in the Cabinet meeting on the 1st of September. Thank you.
Councillor Cole, would you want to respond to that? Or? Sorry. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to raise some deep regret in the use of funding this gap within our budgets from the Derby Live revenue budget of £100,000. The funding gap is very large, and the revenue budget for the Derby Live is very, very small in comparison. £100,000 is like a drop in the ocean, but to the Derby Live budget, it's a very large proportion of that budget. And I would just like to express my deep regret the fact that it's being funded partly through that budget, bearing in mind that many members of this council fought very hard for the Derby Live budget, which never got an increase for many years because of the situation with the Derby Playhouse. And yet here we are now, reducing it yet again by £100,000. And like I said, it's a very large percentage of the Derby Live budget. And I know that it will cause a great deal of hardship and difficulty in that area. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? No? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, the budget situation is one of concern, and I see on page 9 it does list potential revenue budget pressures. And if we look at 3.29, it refers to new legislation, and the first bullet point is child protection requirements under the Lord Laming report. Now, we're all well aware of the baby P issue in Haringey and the recent incidents at Doncaster, and I particularly want to ask the Corporate Director, I'll ask the Corporate Director instead of the Cabinet Member, because I think the Corporate Director is probably more informed than our Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, bearing his remarks to me earlier. But obviously we cannot take shortcuts when we're looking at child protection issues, and I think if there are any budget pressures due to the Lord Laming report, then quite clearly these need to be high up on the agenda. What we don't want in Derby City Council is an inquiry into any children's services and the children that we take care of, particularly in our corporate parenting role and obviously in our expectations in social care workers. So I am concerned about this issue, as I'm sure thousands of parents and carers are if they're listening this evening. So there can be no shortcuts regarding child protection requirements and safeguarding.
Thank you. If there are no further speakers wish to speak, I'll move it to a vote. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Jones to move it.
Sorry, can I move that to the vote, and we will get the headings right in the final document.
Okay, is that seconded? Okay, all those in favour? All those against? Okay, that's carried.
Mr Mayor, before you move on,
yes.
could I exercise my right, please, under Standing Order CP 69 to have my vote of abstention recorded because of the muddle over 46 and 5309, which gives me insufficient information on which to be able to vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10, which is the driver training and qualifications. Councillor Redfern, sorry, I'm a bit confused tonight.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I ask Council to agree this motion to approve the minutes and recommendations of the Taxi Licensing and Appeals Committee of the 22nd of July. However, before Council agrees or disagrees, I feel that it is appropriate to thank Councillor Williams and Councillor Winter for the work that they did put in the working party. And therefore, I move it to Council to accept the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that. And that's seconded? Yep. All those in favour? Okay, that is carried. Okay, item 11, to consider a report of the Director of Corporate and Adult Services concerning a non-urgent executive decision made by the Acting Chief Executive. Councillor Jones?
Sorry, can I just formally move those, please?
Is that seconded? All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Item 12, to consider a report of the Director of Corporate and Adult Services as monitoring officer concerning public questions at full council meeting. Councillor Wood.
Mr Mayor, it falls to me as chair of that working party to move the motion, but reserve the right to speak and express a view contrary to the one that is actually recommended at a later date.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wood. Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This Council needs to oppose this motion as cynical at the least and restrictive at best. Having public questions surely infers that the questions are in public. To have read the question and the answer does not facilitate the sense of public openness. In fact, I would argue it presents the complete opposite, that of secrecy and confidentiality. It also gives a disjointed effect on any supplementary questions and would lead to confusion both here in the Chamber and, more importantly, to those watching on the web. I am very surprised at the current leadership in bringing this motion to Council. I seem to recall they were very vocal in introducing the facility of allowing the public to speak at planning meetings, which I wholeheartedly condone. Yet this motion to change the Constitution is anti-democratic and contrary to the notion that we are here to serve the people of Derby. I am here to serve the people of Derby, and so I have to oppose this motion outright. I would urge all councillors to think independently of party politics and to vote for the rights of our public questioners, the people of Derby. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Grave. We've got Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Dunn, your wishes would be granted. The Labour Group will vote against this motion. The reason that I stand up is that I have stood up before and complained about the issue of managing people in terms of planning applications, so it would be rather untoward of me not to stand up and object to this. It is only 30 minutes. There are ways that we can get around this. I mean, one of the suggestions that wasn't taken part is that actually councillor questions could be tabled like they are in Parliament as written, and they say question number whatever it is, and the answer then comes. The other way of resolving this particular issue is moving standing orders at 9:45 or just there before. Of course, councillors could speak less, but I don't think that's going to be very popular in this part of the chamber, but there you go. They could, but I don't think they will. So I think it's rather unfair. I mean, there are issues about it. Maybe it's usually the half an hour or so, and I accept that. You know, that's the way that life is. People want to come along and express a view. I think we should allow them to come along and express a view and allow them to read their questions there. But we must get some lessons for Councillor Nater so they can read them properly back. That would be my suggestion. But the Labour Group will oppose this, and hopefully the Conservative Group will as well.
Councillor Jennings.
You have your wish. It's quite vital that the public have their right to speak. And 30 minutes is nothing in the terms of a council meeting. It is a defined amount of time that they have. The basis of the motion is actually, it says that it's an attempt to reduce the length of time of council meetings. Well, unless you're actually reducing the 30 minutes, you're not reducing anything by stopping them speaking. So this group will oppose this motion, Mr Mayor. It isn't democratic, and we do believe that people have the right to come and speak, even if it is the usual suspects.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you. This has come from the Cross-Party Member Services Working Group, and it wouldn't be here unless there was some support from that group of cross-party councillors. It's got on this agenda somehow. It was not put here by the, myself as leader or the Cabinet. This group do not support this either. Public... You can laugh all you like. It has come from the Member Services Working Party. Those minutes do come to this meeting, and it is for this council to decide what to do with those minutes. Can we have one speaker, please, Chair? It is for this council chamber to decide what to do with the minutes, as we've already discussed on other matters. We've discussed this in our group. People before me have said that it doesn't cut down the 30 minutes. It won't do anything to shorten the meeting if that was the intention. And the public have more right than anyone to question their councillors. And we are more than happy to have them. It isn't very often that we actually overrun on the 30 minutes at the moment, and I think we should leave things completely as they are and vote against this motion. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dinser.
I think we do have a cross-party agreement on this one.
This is the last speaker on this, I think. I think there's a general consensus here, so can we keep it short and sweet?
The public must have their say. This is a democratic process, and we should not allow curtail any second of this 30 minutes. Thank you.
I think if I let any more people speak, we're defeating the objective in the initial motion. So I'm going to move it to a vote. All those in favour of the motion? All those against? It's lost. Item 13, to consider a report of the Director of Corporate and Adult Services concerning the Office of Honorary Recorder. Councillor Jones, would you like to move it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm really pleased to be able
to... a bit of order, please. Thank you.
I'm very pleased that we've got to this point now, and we have before us a motion. I hope we can have cross-party support for the motion as printed. I look forward to welcoming the new recorder. Move.
All those in favour? Agreed? Okay. Let's go and watch some football game. End of meeting. Don't forget to stand for the Mayor.